What is up YouTube, this is Jam477, and welcome to another video where I suggest erratas for 13 cards that are currently on the ban list, in the OCG and the TCG. At least at the time of making this video. Let's start things off with Magical Scientist. This card was Instant Fusion and Ready Fusion on steroids. Magical Scientist allowed you to bring out any level 6 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck at the cost of 1000 life points. This effect was not a hard once per turn, which meant you could abuse this effect as long as you want, as long as you had life points to pay. If you have seen both seasons of CMO's Progression series, you know how powerful Magical Scientist is. Not only for OTKs, but also for making high-ranking Xyz monsters. So, how do we fix Magical Scientist? Sadly, the only way to fix this card would be to make its effect a hard once per turn. There's just no other way around it. If you have any other ideas, feel free to let me know in the comment section. The next card up is Mass Driver. This card falls into the same line as Cannon Soldier. By tributing one monster, you can burn your opponent's life points for 400. This effect was not a hard once per turn, and you could run multiple copies for more burn damage. This card combined with Substitute and Rotonin created what is known as Frog FTK. So, how do we fix this card? For me, the answer is simple. You make the burn effect a hard once per turn, and throw in a you can only control one copy of this card clause for good measure. The next card we're going to be looking at is Metamorphosis. This card allowed you to tribute any monster you control to bring out a fusion monster from your extra deck, as long as that fusion monster had the same level as the monster you tributed. This card also was needed to make Elemental Hero Neo's Bubble Man work. I don't know why. This card was popular during the GOAT format, as it allowed easy access to Thousand Eyes Restrict by tributing one Scapegoat token that you were bound to generate. And as you might have figured out by now, the fusion monster brought out with this card kept its effects. So, to fix this card, you would need to have it to where whatever fusion monster you brought out with this card would have its effects negated. And you can only activate one copy of this card per turn for good measure. The next card we're going to be looking at is Mind Master. By paying 800 life points and tributing a psychic monster, other than Mind Master itself, you could bring out any level 4 or lower psychic monster from your deck. This effect was not a hard once per turn, and you could also bring out another Mind Master with this effect as well for more shenanigans with your psychic deck. So how do we fix this card? First, the monster you summoned with Mind Master's effect would have its effects be negated. And secondly, slapping a hard once per turn should do the trick. Now we come to Mirage of Nightmare. This card allowed you to draw until you had 4 cards in your hand, but only during your opponent's standby phase. And if you drew any cards with this effect, you had to randomly discard the same number of cards you drew during your standby phase. However, you could bypass this if you could destroy Mirage of Nightmare before or during your standby phase with cards like MST or Emergency Provisions. This card was quite strong back in the day, but it's gotten even better now thanks to hand traps and decks that rely on graveyard setup. Also, this card discard effect works real well with decks like Dark World. So how do we fix this card? I will admit that fixing this card was not easy. The first step I could think of to fix this card would be to add a clause where even if you got rid of Mirage of Nightmare, you still had to discard from your hand. Secondly, I would have it where you couldn't activate any cards or the effects of cards that you drew or discarded with Mirage of Nightmare's effects. And finally, adding a you can only activate one copy of this card per turn for good measure. If any of you can come up with any other better ideas on how to fix Mirage of Nightmare, I'm all ears. Now we come to the 4 number monsters that are currently on the ban list in both the OCG and the TCG. Start things off with number 16, Shockmaster. Shockmaster could shut down 1/3 of the card pool just by detaching one material. At the time of its release, Konami was probably hoping that its summoning condition of requiring 3 level 4 monsters would be enough to stop Shockmaster from seeing that much play in the competitive game. But that was not the case, as it is banned. And given how easy it is to bring out 3 level 4 monsters nowadays, Shockmaster would be a bigger pain in the ass to deal with. So how do we fix this card? Well, my idea would be that you have to detach a certain amount of material to shut down a certain type in the card pool. 1 for traps, 2 for spells, and 3 for monsters. And I would add you could only control 1 copy of this monster just for good measure. The next number monster we're going to be looking at is number 86, Heroic Champion, Rango Mandan. Okay, I think I said it right. When this card came out, Rango Mandan didn't see that much play thanks to its summoning condition of requiring 2 to 5 level 4 warrior monsters. Warrior decks at the time of this card's release couldn't consistently bring out 5 warriors to allow you to use Rango Pogo's more dangerous effects. Being unaffected by everything, preventing your opponent from normal summoning or special summoning, and nuking your opponent's board. Even if it did, Rango Mandan forced you to detach a material during your opponent's end phase. This card started to become a problem thanks to number 75, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, which had the ability to transfer itself and its materials to another number monster. And since this card has been banned, warrior decks have gotten stronger and can spam out 5 warriors with ease. So how do we fix this card? Well, my idea would be this card gains effects based on number of materials if this card has a heroic challenger monster as material. And I would switch around some of the effects. I'll have it where when it has 5 material, I have it be unaffected by other card effects. Once it detaches a material during your opponent's end phase, Rango Pogo would be much easier to deal with. And when it has 3 or more materials, I will apply the nuke your opponent's board. I think these changes would be enough to allow Rango Mandan to come back, but if you have any other suggestions, feel free to let me know. The next number monster we're going to be looking at is number 95, Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon. This card was a powerhouse back when Dragon Rulers ruled the meta. When this card was Succeed Summon, which you could pull up with ease by using a Galaxy Eyes Exceeds monster as material. You could send 3 dragons with different names from your deck to the graveyard, and force your opponent to banish 3 monsters from their deck. This card also had the effect where it can tap monsters twice during the battle phase at the cost of a material, but it was the graveyard setup that landed this card on the ban list. If this card was unbanned today, as is, this card would be a main staple in Dragonlink decks. So, how do we fix this card? The best solution that I could come up with would be that when you send dragons from your deck to grave, you couldn't activate other cards or effects for the rest of the turn, except for Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragons. That should be enough to allow the card to come back into the game. The final number monster we will be looking at is number S0 Utopic Zeil. This was another floodgate card. During your opponent's turn, you could detach a material and stop your opponent from activating any cards or effects for that turn. There were a couple things that stopped this from seeing major play, at least for a while. First, it started off as a jump promo. Then it moved to being a promo for the Maximum Crisis Special Edition set. Then there was this card's summoning condition of requiring 3 number monsters with the same rank. Of course, you could cheat this out with using a Torio monster and discarding a rank up magic normal spell, which is how many people favor bringing this card out. At least until Numeron came into the game. The Numeron deck could bring out 4 Numeron Gate Exceeds monsters thanks to a card called Numeron Calling. Since all Numeron Gate monsters have the same rank of 1, bringing out Utopic Zeil became a lot easier. So, how do we fix this card? Well, the best solution I could think of would be to give Utopic Zeil the same miraja that I gave to Shockmaster, where you had to detach a certain amount of material to shut down a certain type of card pool. 1 per trap, 2 per spell, and 3 per monsters. I would also make it so that you can only activate this effect at the start of your opponent's main phase, and make this card a hard once per turn for good measure. If any of you have any other ideas, feel free to let me know. The next card up is Outer Entity Azathoth. This card was another floodgate, as when this card was a C summon, your opponent couldn't activate any monster effects for the rest of the turn. The only thing that prevented it from being meta was its summoning condition of 3 level 5 monsters. That all changed when the Fentonite's Breakout Magic Launch came out. Then this card became such a problem that it ended up on the ban list. So, how do we fix this card? Well, I would make it to where its ability to stop your opponent monster effects for that turn could only happen if this card has an outer entity exceeds monster as material. That should be enough to allow Azathoth to come back. If you have any other ideas, feel free to let me know. The next card up is Performer Mage Plush Fire. This card was put on the ban list because of its monster effect, which allowed you to special summon any Performer Mage monster from your hand or deck, except for a copy of itself. This effect was not a hard once per turn, which happens to be the only way I could think of to fix this card to be unbanned. The penultimate card of this video is Phenician Cluster Amaryllis. This card, when it was destroyed and sent to the graveyard, could burn your opponent's life points for 800. Then, during your end phase, you could bring this card back by banishing a plant monster. This revival effect was not a hard once per turn. This card, combined with Topologic Bomber Dragon and at least 10 or so plant monsters in your graveyard, created an FTK. So, how do we fix this card? I would have a where you make its revival effect from the graveyard a hard once per turn and only once that turn. That should be enough to allow Phenician Cluster Amaryllis to come back. And finally, we have Predator Plant Verte Anacon. Much like Crystal Unhealthy Fibrax, Verte Anacon was created to allow you to fusion summon easier back when monsters special summoned from the extra deck were limited to being summoned in the extra monster zone or a zone enabling monster points to. At the cost of 2,000 life points, you could send a polymerization or fusion normal or quick spell to the graveyard, copy that spell's effect, and bring out any fusion monster. And it's that effect that landed this card on the ban list. Players will use this card to bring out powerful fusion monsters like Rally's Dark Dragoon and Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, which were game-ending boss monsters. So how do we fix Verte Anacon to be unbanned? At first I thought I'd get rid of the fusion aspect of the spell copying effect would be enough, but then I came up with another idea. That idea is that you could use the spell copying effect at the start of your main phase 1. That way you had to choose whether you wanted to bring out a powerful fusion monster and give up your ability to special summon any further, or be able to special summon a bunch of times and get no fusion monster using Verte's effect. This also meant you have to wait a turn and keep Verte alive long enough to use this copying effect. I also changed its summoning conditions to require 2 Predator Plant monsters for good measure. Now some could make the argument that changing Verte's summoning condition would be enough to allow Verte to come back, but let's not forget that Predator Plant engines like Orca Scorpio and Darling Cobra were a thing. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Again, as I said, if you have any ideas how any of these cards could be fixed, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, I'm Jeff477, signing out.